We've got our first speaker. Here we go. So basically, have a great time, and I'd like to introduce you're going to have to pronounce your name for me. Hello?
Yes.
Yona Welker.
Yona Welker.
Yona Welker, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's start. So our conversation is dedicated to algorithmic diversity, AI and ethics. My work is about neurodiversity because almost 1 in 4 of people on the planet Earth either neurodiverse or have differences in sensory and cognitive ability. And my work is change this agenda. On one hand, I serve to the European Commission, screening a lot of application and research across AI, blockchain, virtual reality. At the same time, I work on the emerging portfolio of startups focused on this area. I'm also work on the policies focus on ethics, safety, well-being, because until 2020, we had no any frameworks focused on children, disability, women, diversity. And finally, I'm trying to democratize this movement. I design hackathons for women in AI in the United States. Now we work on something similar in APAC. Our goal is to involve more people from technology world in research, in ethics, in education, to the creation of new environments for neurodivergent individuals, for people with different sensory and cognitive ability, because there are almost more than billions of them. And unfortunately, 90% of them are not employed. And unfortunately, it's a drama for all of us. So today, I would love to talk about algorithmic diversity and how we're able to bring ecosystem to these people, and more importantly, which challenges they face today. So first of all of us, as I mentioned, on the spectrum, at least 1 in 6 of people live in one or more neurological conditions. 1 in 7 are neurodivergent, and 1 in 4 have a mental health disorders, which comorbid with some kind of a cognitive or sensory differences, like physical, tactile experiences, visual, color experiences, differences in the system of learning, memorizing, systemizing, empathizing. But at the same time, it's also comorbid. So it's also underlined with the other type of disorders related to disability, mental health, endocrine, neuromuscular system. But more importantly, it's also amplified with the other criteria like gender. For instance, women require other criteria for diagnosis, because unfortunately, women in 4 times less are correctly diagnosed than men, because we use the same criteria. And unfortunately, we completely ignore such thing as intersectionality, because until today, we mostly build our research around middle class and ignore all the communities beyond this spectrum. So how we try to solve it? First of all, today the ecosystem of neurodivergent technology and environments is a modular itself. And recently we presented the vision for European Commission, how it could work. So first of all, now we have a spectrum of the startups. On one hand is a neurodivergent hiring, is a platforms would help to connect people with the less ability to communicate to the opportunities in data science, engineering. There we limit communication, more prioritizing text. We decrease the level of the sounds, specifically loud sounds, with more focus on text. Is a social robotics at classrooms, which adapt the pace of learning to the children. At the same time, is the glasses with augmented reality, specifically relevant to the today talk, when we're able to leverage augmented reality to better recognize emotions, because in most cases, unfortunately, neurodivergent individuals are not able to recognize emotions. For instance, children are not able to recognize mother emotions. So we built glasses for that. And finally, we use biofeedback in order to connect people brains to external environments. Specifically, it's focused on people with a neurodisability when we use biofeedback to control external, sometimes even synthesizers for creative activities. And at the same time, we came up with a spectrum of a criteria to build this system. So first of all, we create the levels of the system itself: sensibility, physical and tactile experiences, visual and color experiences, differences in the system of learning, memorizing, systemizing, and empathizing. At the same time, we bring the layers of the research. It's a spectrum. So the spectrum of neurodiversity is a comorbidity, is underlying conditions, is a gender, as a mechanism of support and caregivers, human involvement, safety, and privacy. So which the key problems we're trying to solve in all of this work? So first of all is access itself. So as I mentioned, 90% of people on the neurodiverse spectrum or autism spectrum or a similar cognitive disorders or sensory disorders are not employed, they're isolated, they're comorbid with the underlying mental health disorders, with digestive system, autoimmune, endocrine, a lot of problems. So we trying to solve it through combination of research, technology, startups, policies, and currently there are at least several key levels and challenges we're trying to solve. So first of all is a representation in teams itself. So unfortunately, when we start to work in this field, we explored that only 10% of data science or technology teams presented with women or presented with the particular groups like neurodivergent or disabled. So we have no relevant people to spend research, to ask right questions, to better understand particular communities and create solutions for different countries, for different regions. So in most cases, it was not relevant. So the first thing we're trying to solve a problem of a representation, and that's why a significant part of our work is a connection of a corporate level and hackathons, universities, campuses, and we use it both on venture capital work and both also on the level of European Commission. At the same time as a research and criteria, until today, technology work was really driven by very narrow vision of technology. Designer, developer, engineer is completely ignore the vision of ethics professionals, of the social science professionals, or gender studies professionals. So in most cases, we lack anyone who are able to better understand how to research children, how to deal with the situation when we need to create solution for ADHD, for autism, for schizophrenia. What's the minimal age for the research? What's the right way to ask questions? What's the proper environment? So we needed to reshape how we see the system of the teams, representation, but also how to involve the actual framework to research them. So that's why recently we created two frameworks. One is called Research Through Divergent Lens and is accessible through open source, and we hope to integrate it across ecosystem very soon. And another one, it was suggested to the European Commission, it's called Technology Transfer and Evaluation through Accessibility and Algorithmic Diversity Lens. So it focused on combination of technology and human rights, and also different levels of the systems like sensibility, physical and tactile experiences, visual and color experiences, how we're able to align AI to these things and how to properly evaluate for ethics, safety, privacy, because until today, we mostly prioritize GDPR or data privacy, but we never thought about actual dangerous elements of the technology, including a lot of interruption in the personal life and health, well-being, because in most cases, we integrate this technology across classrooms, for children, as a smart toys, for interactive environments, and finally, how we actually integrate the layers of a spectrum, because neurodiversity spectrum is very complex. Sometimes person is not able to talk at all and communicate, but at the same time, this person has a very high level of intelligence. or opposite situation. The person has a good communication skills and ability, but at the same time, it has a cognitive impairment. So it's about frameworks we're trying to use. Another level is a legal environments and high-level frameworks. Unfortunately, we're not able to build such type of technology completely isolated from public system, which is why we work on one hand with the research institution across the world, but also with the European Commission, in order to come up with the new high-level frameworks. Until 2020, as I mentioned, until UNICEF came up with the AI in children, and AI now came up with the AI in disability, we had no frameworks how to use AI and technology safely for disabled groups, because we have a bias for women, for people of color, but we also have a bias for people with a different type of ability, with a different cognitive spectrum, different type of a communication. In most cases, AI and automated system exclude them from the research, from the statistics. So we needed to completely reshape it. At the same time, unfortunately, caregivers were excluded from the system, because until today, we believe that the only person who actually use an app, a platform, or environment is a person itself. But in terms of a neurodivergent individuals, there is a whole spectrum of stakeholders, family, parents, counselor, doctors, educators, and many, many other people who involved in provide data input or interact with the environment in some way. So in other words, we not only involve them in the research and use some type of a framework for them, but we also create the interface would actually consider different type of a cognitive ability or different type of stakeholders, depending how we provide data input. Another level is adoption. We work with many technology startups, but at the same time with different type of organizations, institutions, agencies, and we explored that even in the most progressive countries, like Nordic countries, like Denmark, United States, it takes up to a few years and up to 5 years in order to integrate such type of a technology, because we still have no skills and roles. Only the few of people who actually able to actively use social robotics at classrooms or use interactive smart glasses for autistic children without any kind of a support from professionals. So in most cases, we explore that most of these companies, of these technology projects, should come up with curriculums, with the clear curriculums and creation of the roles for nurses, if we talk about medical environment, for teachers, if we talk about classrooms and schools. So in most cases, with companies, which are part of our portfolio, become some kind of a learning companies, not just hardware developer, they actually create from the scratch the whole vision, how it should be used, what's the proportion of the human involvement, because until today, we believe that we should create completely safe environment. Then we use, for instance, a robot and person who involved in this interaction. But at some point, we explored that we create echo chamber or filter bubble. Then person just completely isolated from our real communication with people, and it's not really good for a cognitive development. And there is some kind of a balance of a human involvement and technology involvement. And depending on the spectrum, depending on the case, on the mental health and many other criteria, we should come up with a flexible, personalized environment. And another thing is that ethics frameworks. We actively working in order to make environments not only efficient for development of autistic and neurodivergent children and young adults, but also safe, because unfortunately, this technology can be used not only for good, but also for harassment, for bullying, for instance, as social networks are used today. Around 90% of people with disabilities notified that they were an object of harassment at least one time during their life. So unfortunately, we should be very aware about this situation. So our ethics frameworks are pretty comprehensive, and recently we issued the whole framework focused on neurodivergent technology. It was called Human-Centric AI and Ethics. Once again, you're able to find it in open source. And it was focused on at least 20 criteria in creation of frameworks for social robotics, for AI in education, AI in nursing, in medicine, not only for autism, but also related cognitive disorder, including people in age and elders, and people with particular mental health disorders, including bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and severe forms of depression. So it involves at least 20 criteria, and one of the key elements include actually reshaping how we see ethics. So first of all, fundamental element, we're really going to bioethics as a foundation for our work, is a more combination of a collaborative work of ethics professionals, social scientists, medical professionals, in order to come up with the human rights bioethics frameworks and accessible vocabulary, which they actually circulate across the team. Second is a definition of accountable agents and the levels of accountability on the end-to-end levels of research, development, and deployment. Also, working on transparent models and explainability and answerability, because it's not currently we have a problem not only with the black box problem, but we're not able to explain some complex solutions, but also a problem then we involve too much open source and ready-to-use libraries and not very experienced developers, which are not able to explain what they're working on, specifically for a different type of stakeholders. And since our work is pretty comprehensive, it became difficult. Another level is a technical fixes loop in updates. We work a lot with different type of companies, and we explored that current updates loop is too focused on technical fixes itself, but it's very often it ignores social elements. So sometimes we don't need to create update at all, but mostly been focused on team, on ethics, on social elements, and not just deploy another update in order to amplify existing bias, because the reason behind bias is not technology, but people. And finally, is a training data with zero exclusion principle and fairness. We came out with several criteria focused not only on people of color, women. We had around 30% of bias for these groups, but also for different type of disabilities, including neuromuscular disorder and damages related to neuromuscular disorder with facial problems. And currently is accessible in open source as well. Another level is autonomy in human involvement with what I've mentioned, safety and well-being, echo chamber and silence, and misuse. And finally, what we actually try to do as well is to democratize it, because unfortunately, until today, most of the work in our field was disconnected. The biggest startup accelerator focused on disabilities located in Australia. Our working group located in London, our funds located in the United States, and the policies mostly produced by European Commission in Europe, in Switzerland and Belgium. So in most cases are completely disconnected agents. So in order to come up with the actually working solution for patients, for millions and now almost billion of people who have a cognitive and sensory differences, We need to work collaboratively, and that's why we started so actively working with the universities like MIT, with the organization of hackathons and bottom-up innovation like Women in AI. We organized two hackathons focused on zero exclusion and accessibility and using environments, VR, AR, AI, for a different type of assistive technology, for different type of groups, but more importantly, in order to build the representation of different type of nations, ethnicities, gender, abilities, which we actually still like in our team. And currently we're working on the big project focused on the changes on accessibility, both in the United States, in Europe, focused on accessibility strategy 2030. It will include not only changes on the vision of the legal status of neurodivergent individuals, but ecosystem of technology behind it, including the modular vision of the classrooms, workplaces, and how governments and ecosystem able to deliver it. I think that's all. As usually, I'm always happy to connect after my talk. We're actively looking for people who are would love to use their skills in order to build virtual reality for storytelling for neurodiverse individuals, or use augmented reality for emotional recognition, or use computer vision or facial recognition or speech recognition. There are a lot of technologies where we actively use for different type of a spectrum depending on the case. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm ready to answer all of the questions.
Wow, that is, I think we could keep going for the rest of the day talking about what needs to happen, and where can people follow? Where is this conversation happening about the important issues that are coming that we need to face before this train leaves the station? Can you hear my question?
Could you repeat it? I mean, I thought it kind of statement.
Yeah, no, I'm asking where's this conversation happening, and who are the organizations and other things that people should follow and learn more and contribute, and where should you spend your time when you have everything to do, ensuring the safety, privacy, inclusivity, diversity, ethics, and everything that we need to really address?
Yes. So first of all, as I mentioned, it's a kind of disconnected. For instance, we have a neurodiversity tech panel and disability working group in London. So it's a tech London advocate is in London. At the same time, we have a coalition of funds in the United States, is currently an NDA. And there's a European Commission, so you're able to follow it, and you're able to follow Women in AI. We have a hackathons, and feel free to find it as well. Or just find my account. There are all of the links, all of the organizations. There's a whole list. I mean, there are really many of them.
And let's say the companies that are going to be building and fueling and profiting from this new world online, if they had a responsibility to do the right thing, and we tax them and take the money and put it into education and everything else, where would you spend the money? Where would you connect the most urgent problems facing us?
So first of all, I don't like the terminology, the right thing. I don't like even the word like doing it for good. First of all, it's a really huge market, and most of the technologies we have now for disability, for neurodiversity, actually become a part of the bigger markets. For instance, when you work on soft robotics, initially is a rehabilitation technology which used for disabled people, but after that it's become a part of a sport or travel industry. The same with speech recognition or facial recognition. Initially, we use it for disabled people, but it's become a part of smart cities. So recently, we've seen how some autism-focused companies attracted around $1 million for a pre-seed round, and after that, similar technology attracted even more for personalized hiring. So in most cases, disability and neurodiversity-focused technology is a test very innovative things in education, in healthcare, in hiring, smart cities, which after that become a part of the bigger market, sometimes up to 5 or 10 times in terms of a market size and an opportunity. So then companies and organizations become a part of the venture rounds or invest in their own organization. It's not just about being good. It's actually about building a future. And as you remember, SMS on your telephone initially was created for disabled people, but now is a part of a whole world in our phones, and the same with almost any type of a technology on the spectrum of facial speech or computer vision.
That's a great point. And questions from the audience? There's a mic up there. Anybody want to ask anything? Yep. So I think that's a great point, that there's a great opportunity to do well by doing good, and an ecosystem of companies will come to serve the needs of the communities that we're talking about, and everything else it's going to be a big mess of regulation and incentivizing people to do the right things. But what existing things can we learn from traditional, say, in ethics with video game ratings or existing efforts in current media? How is that going to translate to? Is there anybody leading in those areas as we move into virtual and augmented areas?
Yes. First of all, one of the things that I explored, there is not so much disconnection. For instance, we use games for autism application and virtual reality. We use different type of storytelling scenarios for mobile apps, for games, for virtual augmented reality. So in most cases, there is a direct connection. And that's why, for instance, many of the products we try to market or support, sometimes we targeted several markets, sometimes mental health, sometimes neurodiversity, sometimes even anxiety or a bigger market. So in most cases, one of the trends I see, investors and creators see we're all on the spectrum. So if you go in smaller, later you go in bigger. So no matter you're a developer, investor, the trend almost the same. So if you build something in one niche, after that you're able to leverage in another one.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your talk, and really looking forward to seeing how this develops. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.